Ah, the nectar of life, a drink that is befitting for one such as I. What are you doing? I'm a vampire enjoying some blood. That's just cranberry juice. Cranberry. And also, you're not a vampire. I wake up every morning from my coffin, I'm a walking corpse, and I have a strong aversion to sunlight. That's your bed, not a coffin. The reason you feel like such a dead body all the time is because of your terrible, terrible diet and vitamin deficiencies, and your aversion to sunlight isn't because you're a vampire, it's because you're a gross nerd who never goes outside. Oh. So, vampires are still cool, right? The vampire craze of the late 2000s is still going strong. Or at least, I really hope it is, because putting on eyeliner was quite hard. But what if vampires, but anime? That's the question that video game Code Vein tries to ask. As well as, what if we make it also a Souls-like game, you know, which is just an action game to you or I? The answer to all of which is, yeah, it's fun, it's fine, it's fun, it's good, yeah. So, follow me as we travel through the darkness and consume the very essence of life itself. Ooh. Code Vein is a world where humanity has been devastated by the Great Collapse, where terrible demons racked the world and everything was terrible. But it's fine, because the way to fix this was to exhume dead bodies, plant a parasite into their hearts and turn them into revenants. Vampiric superhumans who rely on human blood in order to stop themselves from turning into monsters, known as the Lost. If this all sounds a little dreary and glum, fret not, because as a sign of any good JRPG, it's got a really over-the-top anime opening song as well. You are a vampire of your own design, who also has crippling amnesia. And the character creator is actually really quite fun and interesting. You can actually create a character that looks like it fits in with the world itself, and while I risk sounding like an old man pointing at a character creator and going, look it, you could spend ages adjusting the number of different pieces of hair you've given your character, or getting lost in high-tech hat adjustment. Even permanently affixing it to your own knee. Yes, this is what the game designers wanted. In this dark and dreary world where the blood trees are drying up and there's just blood running out of everywhere, you're trying to track the source of all this blood through like the blood veins in the world to try and restore the source of all the blood. But fret not, you're not on your own during this grand epic quest. You've got a variety of NPC allies who are there to help you along the way.
What do you say? Would you mind working together? Don't worry, I'm not gonna stab you in the back.
I didn't think you were going to stab me in the back. Now it's the only thing I'm thinking. But we're not here for a tale of blood and trees and more blood. Although, I mean, we basically probably are. The thing is, it's just like not even at the top of the list there. You see, what probably is at the top of the list is the combat. In your traditional Souls-like action game genre, you're hitting enemies with your big anime weapon, but having to look out for your stamina, because when that runs out, you can't really attack, or dodge, or do anything. But that's not all. The enemies all hit really hard, so you'll have to find yourself mastering the powers of hitting foes when they're open, dodging under their attacks, and sometimes managing to parry at just the right time, or find yourself all too rapidly being crushed under heel. So far, so Souls-like, but what makes Code Vein unique? You can't just simply release Dark Souls but put little fangs on everyone and hope no one notices. Well, the thing that makes Code Vein unique are the blood codes, like in the title of the game. These are basically your classes that determine how you play the game. They all have names like Fighter or Caster that seem self-explanatory, but eventually you have things like Darkseeker or Skethachach, which are less obvious. Each one changes your stats and the weapon types you can use, but more importantly, all come with their own unique spells and abilities. Yes! Code Vein has a plethora of active and passive abilities to equip that are all based on your blood codes. And these add a wide variety to the game. You won't find yourself locked into being a mage only to get stuck halfway through the game. You can simply change your blood code and suddenly you're running around with a giant sword. But also you can still use your magical spells. You see, you can use your souls, or whatever they are in this game. Blood, it's probably blood. To level up, you can also use them to acquire new and exciting skills for the various different classes. And if you use that class often enough, then you eventually unlock that skill for general use. Meaning that while some of the starting classes have really useful skills that you might want to use all the time, you're not trapped having to use those really basic ones and unable to use some of the more exciting and advanced ones that you unlock later on. This is perfect because it allows you to dive into a whole new class and try out a whole new plethora of skills while still keeping at least like a little toe in that comfort pool of skills you already know, skills you're already using. So that way you can try something completely new, completely different, but also not find yourself completely out of the loop, really. So you're always kind of functioning. This, alongside all the different like weapons and coats and stat scalings and all this sort of stuff, just leads to this wide number of numbers and systems just swirling around and changing. And surely the numbers must mean something. They're always just moving and changing. There must be some deep meaning to these numbers. What do they mean? I have no clue how any of these systems work. This is where I come up against one of the first speed bumps in Code Vein. It's not actually that hard. Now, it may be because I am God's gift to video games. And I am. But you'll find that you'll just come across large chunks of the game where you never really feel threatened. You just find yourself sprinting at enemies, normally busting them up with your large, oversized anime sword, and you rarely have any actual fear of consequence. Most enemies attack slow enough that you can easily dodge roll or attack away before they even land, so you never really have any threat or fear of loss. End up going through so many areas of the game, accruing massive chunks of blood, and never really having to second guess myself or think about going back, or fear of losing them. Oh, maybe I will feel a little bit of fear. Or maybe not. It is very possible that a lot of the game's difficulty is lost through the constant companions you'll have with you. If you suddenly get knocked down, chances are quite high that your companion will manage to bring you back up. But this does mean you can be a lot more reckless with your approach to the game, and just get bogged down and repeatedly hitting the attack button. To be honest, the combat can all seem a little messy at times, whether it's down to the many different skills flying around, or your friend doing their own thing, whatever that is. It can all end up feeling a little cluttered. But it's not like I'm going to get rid of the companions, I enjoy having them around. The characters are actually quite fun and enjoyable in their own ways. You see, not only does the world have its own the overt melodrama that you'd come to expect from basically every JRPG ever these days, the characters are also presented in a way which really makes them endear to you in basically two ways. One of which is just the animations.
Look at all this stuff. Did you gather it yourself? Oh, you're feeling better! That's great! I was worried about you.
The other, which is more unique, is the way in which you learn about every character's backstory, in which you walk down this dark, dreary corridor, learning snippets of their terrible, dark tale. While I am being needlessly facetious with all the dark and doom, there are actually quite interesting moments and can actually evoke some kind of emotion through your cold, dead, reanimated body, like surprise or warmth. Despite these being linear moments of walking down a corridor looking at a number of dioramas, it's a way of telling a story that manages to keep you always yearning to see the next bit, as they provide just enough story that things are never really clear. Speaking of corridors, here's a dark, dreary corridor of doom and gloom for you. I'm so alone. But my point is that at the start of the game, a lot of the areas all feel kind of disappointingly linear in that you're just sprinting ahead straight forward down these very linear paths, which also rarely have any form of notable branching paths that have any meaning, so they're all kind of a little bit boring. But that's not necessarily all bad. The areas tend to be at least somewhat interesting to look at as you traverse the last remnants of civilization through a deserted city full of ruinous buildings and dried up shorelines, overrun with coral and abandoned freighters. That said though, eventually the levels progress into, well, this madness maze of despair, so the game's inclusion of a minimap doesn't necessarily destroy the sense of exploration. Code Vein has put me in a tricky situation of sorts. You see, it's not that it's a bad game. It's fine, it's perfectly good, it's fine. But that's the thing, it doesn't really go beyond that. It doesn't dwell into anything wonderful. It presents an interesting and wonderful story that's got some really interesting systems to play with and tinker with. The issue being the blood veins, the blood codes, because of what they are, which is an interesting system, they also mean that leveling up your character just becomes a practice of you just increase the level and the game does the rest for you. You're not actually putting that much thought into it. So all your blood echoes, or whatever they are, just become meaningless. You just either increase your number of spells you can learn, or mindlessly increase your level. I don't think I ever actually sat on a blood code in the game ever, really. The moment I got all the spells for one of them, I would just automatically change to another. Because I'm such a completionist, I felt the need to always be unlocking things, so I was never really at an optimum position because I was always playing something I didn't know, essentially. But at the same time, it never really impacted my gameplay at all. Sure, I'd have to occasionally maybe change my weapon, but at the end of the day, the game itself was still simple enough that even that didn't really change how I played. Your equipment and your coats, they all begin to feel a little superfluous at times because they don't really have that big of an impact on how the game is played, and you begin to yearn for just some form of customization. Yes! It just lacks that extra bit of edge to make it wonderful. I'm not saying that it has to be the hardest game in the world. There is nothing wrong in having a Souls-like game that's a little lighter for the JRPG crowd, you know? But at the same time, it just kind of lacks the fangs, ironically, to make it impactful and meaningful at times. Sure, I died to the odd boss now and then, but I feel like that was down to my own arrogance more than anything. I am God's gift to video games! And what is God, if not arrogant? But it just feels all a little too forgiving. Enemy attacks are always just slow enough for the most part that you can always reliably see it and dodge out of the way, or even see it and then get an attack in and then dodge out of the way. The story in the world is wonderful and interesting and truly actually quite unique in its own way. But the meat that most people are going to be coming for will be the combat. And it's not that it falls short, it's just that it doesn't stand up tall enough, if that makes any sense. Don't get me wrong, it is still a solid like 7 or 8 out of 10. It is still good. It just doesn't do anything that groundbreaking. For me, it felt more like a JRPG player's Dark Souls game than a Dark Souls game player's JRPG. Which it just isn't really what I was looking for, if that makes any sense. Hello, and thank you for watching my video. If you liked it, feel free to let me know in the comment section, or leave a like or something. My god, I did not think this through. All the blood's rushing to my head and I think I'm going to die. If you want, check out some of my other videos. One is about Luigi and what he got up to in Paper Mario Thousand Year Door. Otherwise, there's a board game one, I think, about Terra Mystica. Also, if you click on my face, you'll be able to subscribe. Please and thank you. I didn't die for this.